Police officer lies to woman in court. He had no idea she was a... The courtroom was enveloped in a palpable tension, as if the air were electrified. Clara Silver, a young lawyer with unwavering determination, adjusted the tie of her dark suit while surveying the audience. Some gazes followed her, filled with hope, others with skepticism. Her client, Anna, sat beside her, trembling slightly, hands intertwined, eyes glistening, but Clara knew she was innocent. It was her duty to prove it. Police officer Pedro Almeida, an imposing and authoritative figure, took the stand. His brown eyes, which seemed to pierce the soul, were fixed on Anna. Clara felt a chill down her spine. He was known for his rigid stance and unshakable convictions, but there was something in his expression that made her hesitate. "Mr. Almeida," Clara began, her voice firm yet gentle, "can you tell us what happened on the night of the crime?" "Of course, Doctor," he replied with a disdainful smirk. "We were on patrol when we heard screams. We arrived at the scene and found the accused with the weapon in hand next to the victim." He spoke with such conviction that the audience murmured, some leaning forward, absorbing every word. Clara furrowed her brow. "And the weapon, Mr. Almeida? Can you confidently say it was in Anna's hand?" "Without a doubt," he said, crossing his arms. "The scene was clear." "Clear." "Mr. Almeida," Clara repeated, her voice rising in intensity, "are you sure there was no one else at the scene? Someone who could have done this?" The officer's eyes gleamed with a mix of anger and disdain. "I didn't see anyone else." "But, Mr. Almeida, the defense has records indicating there were others in the area at the time of the crime. Witnesses claiming to have seen a hooded figure running away. You didn't mention that in your report, did you?" The courtroom fell silent, and Clara felt adrenaline coursing through her veins. The officer hesitated, his expression slightly shifting. Clara sensed a crack in his facade. I didn't consider those statements relevant at the time," he murmured, but his voice lacked the same confidence as before. "Didn't consider them relevant. A hooded figure who could be the real culprit?" Clara pressed, each word a precise strike. The jury looked at the officer with newfound doubt, and Clara knew she was starting to dismantle the lie. "Doctor, that's irrelevant," he retorted, but his voice was weaker. "Relevant or not, I will prove that the truth is much more complex than you would like it to be," Clara declared, feeling the power of truth pulse in her chest. "You are here to protect justice, not to cover up mistakes." The atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. People began to whisper, doubt settling in. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility, and at the same time the excitement of being close to a breakthrough. She turned to Anna, who was watching her with a mix of hope and fear in her eyes. Clara realized she needed to look beyond the policeman's lie. There was more at stake. "Anna," she whispered, "trust me. We'll uncover the truth." At the end of the testimony, Clara requested a break. As the judge left, she approached her client. "We need more information. Do you have someone who can corroborate your alibi?" Anna shook her head, her expression troubled. "No, it was just me and my brother. But he can't testify. He's in a place I can't access." Clara's heart raced. "Are you referring to the rehabilitation center? We need to talk to him. If he was with you, it could change everything. But he won't want to get involved. He doesn't like being reminded of the past," Anna replied, her voice trembling. "We have to take the risk," Clara insisted. "If he can confirm he was with you that night, it may be the key to your defense." The court reconvened. The silence was deafening as the judge returned to the room. Clara sat down, her mind racing with strategies and possibilities. The policeman still looked nervous, his hands trembling slightly. She saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes, and it encouraged her. "Mr. Almeida," Clara began, her voice steady, "do you really believe you are delivering justice, or are you just trying to protect your own image?" The question hung in the air, and the truth seemed within reach. What Clara didn't know was that behind the policeman's lie were even darker secrets that could change everything she thought she knew. The game was just beginning, and Clara was determined to go all the way to uncover the truth. Clara was lost in her thoughts as she walked through the neon-lit streets, the murmur of the city around her blending with the echo of her doubts. The trial had been a battlefield, And Anna's defense, a woman who appeared to be the victim of a corrupt system, now left her uneasy. The image of Anna, with her vacant stare and trembling voice, wouldn't leave her mind. How could someone so fragile be linked to a dark past? Clara wondered, as the city lights reflected in her unshed tears. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to visit the police archives that night. The smell of aged paper and the darkness of the place heightened the tension in her chest. Clara knew she was risking not only her career, but also her safety. With each step, the memory of her childhood marked by betrayal and loneliness emerged, like shadows dancing on the walls. "I can't fail," she whispered to herself, as she flipped through yellow documents. After hours of research, a file caught her attention. Anna's name was linked to a case of embezzlement of public funds, but what intrigued her most was the name of the officer who had investigated the case. Paulo Mendes. A shiver ran down her spine. He was a well-known name, one of the most respected in the department. Clara remembered how he had whispered promises of justice during the trial. "How could I have been so naive?" she murmured, the weight of betrayal becoming unbearable. At that moment her phone vibrated, breaking the silence. It was an anonymous message. "Be careful what you discover. Some truths are better left buried." Clara's heart raced. She looked around, the air heavy with the feeling of being watched. Who would dare to threaten me? Adrenaline surged through her veins, and the decision was made. She would not back down. Clara decided to confront Anna. That morning she walked into the interrogation room, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the tense air. Anna was sitting there, looking fragile, but Clara saw a glimmer of determination in her eyes. "We need to talk about Paulo Mendes," Clara said firmly, noticing Anna's expression quickly shift to a mask of panic. "You know him, don't you?" Anna hesitated, her voice wavering. He helped me once. But I can't talk about this, Clara. It's dangerous." The desperation in the woman's voice tightened Clara's heart. "You don't need to be afraid," Clara insisted. "I'm here to protect you." But deep down, she knew that it wasn't just Anna who was in danger. Clara herself was being pulled into an ever-deepening abyss. "I know you have a past," Clara said, looking Anna in the eyes. "You don't need to hide it from me. This is the only way we can change the course of your case." Anna finally surrendered, her voice barely a whisper. "There was a group, and Paulo was involved. They manipulated the evidence, made everything look like an accident. I didn't want to be part of it, but they threatened me." Clara felt a wave of outrage. "We can expose this. We can end the corruption that's destroying lives." Anna shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "What you don't understand is that they won't stop. They will do anything to silence you." Adrenaline pulsed through Clara's veins as she stood up, realizing she had no time to waste. She needed to find concrete evidence of the corruption. "Do you know where I can find it?" Clara asked, already knowing this was their only chance. Anna looked down, her voice almost inaudible. "In the evidence room at the precinct. But it's risky. They always have surveillance." Clara did not hesitate. "Then we have to go now. The E." Two women left the courthouse with the burning determination to change their lives. Fear still lingered, but the urgency of the truth made it unbearable. Clara felt that every step she took toward the truth was also a step toward her own redemption. And as darkness approached, a light ignited within her, illuminating the path that would lead her to discover that true justice might be closer than she ever imagined. The courtroom was silent, a silence that seemed to cut the air like a sharp knife. Clara, sitting in the front row, watched Carlos with an expression of disbelief. He was there, impassive, his eyes cold and calculating, while she tried to piece together the puzzle unraveling before her. The ex-cop, Miguel, beside her, felt the tension pulsing between them. He knew the truth needed to be revealed, but what they were about to discover could change everything. "He can't get away with this," Clara murmured, more to herself than to Miguel. Her voice trembled not just with anger, but with a deep fear that was beginning to settle in her heart. She knew that what was at stake was greater than her own life. It was justice being manipulated by someone so close, so familiar. Miguel turned to her, his gaze steady yet filled with compassion. We will expose this lie, Clara. You are not alone in this. He took her hand, a simple gesture, but one that brought a wave of comfort amid the chaos. It was a connection that grew stronger with each passing day, a bond fortified in the adversities they faced together. As witnesses were called, Clara remembered the moment she met Miguel. He had been in a bar surrounded by shadows and bitter memories, a man marked by the betrayal of his own comrades. His courage inspired her to move forward, to not give up. But now the insecurities she fought to hide began to rise. What if this all ended in tragedy? What if Carlos had powerful allies who could silence them? The judge banged his gavel, demanding order, but Clara felt her heart race. The crucial moment was approaching. Carlos, with his arrogant smile, looked at the audience as if he were the king of a realm with no limits. Clara could no longer bear it. She stood up, her voice resonating with a determination that surprised her. "Carlos, you're lying. You know you're manipulating all of this." The room fell into absolute silence, all eyes on her. Miguel watched her, a silent pride swelling in his chest. Yet, Clara felt a wave of vulnerability. What would follow her declaration? What would happen to her? But the thought of seeing Carlos go unpunished drove her to continue. Carlos laughed, a sound that thundered in the silence. "Do you think your words will change anything, Clara? You are just a woman trying to assert herself in a world you don't understand." The venom in his voice was palpable. "And you are a police officer who betrayed your own profession," Miguel interjected, his tone grave. "The truth always comes to light, Carlos, and your time is coming." Carlos's lawyer, a well-dressed man with an air of superiority, stood up to contest. "This is a desperate attempt to divert attention from your own mistakes. Clara has no evidence, only empty accusations." The atmosphere in the room shifted. Miguel and Clara's words were not just challenging Carlos. They were challenging an entire system that had rotted from within. Clara felt adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had to move forward, not just for herself, but for all those who had been silenced. "I have evidence," she declared, confidence growing with each word, "and I will present it." Her gaze met Miguel's, and he gave her a slight nod, as if to say that her strength was what united them. The judge, intrigued, called for the evidence to be presented. Clara pulled out a folder she had prepared with Miguel, filled with documents, and records showing Carlos's connection to the criminal network. Her hand trembled slightly, but determination burned within her. These documents show illegal transactions, threats, and even bribes that Carlos and his team carried out to silence witnesses and manipulate the judicial system, she stated, her voice now resonating with power. Murmurs began to spread throughout the room, and Clara felt she was on the line between victory and defeat. Looking at Miguel, she saw he was also nervous, but his presence beside her was a reminder that she was not fighting alone. "You have no idea what you're doing, Clara," Carlos snarled, his threatening tone breaking the rising tension. "You will regret it." "If I regret anything, it will be not having done this sooner," she replied, steady as a rock. Justice must prevail. With each word she spoke, Clara felt a weight being lifted off her shoulders. The fear was still there, but now it served as fuel, a drive that pushed her forward. Miguel moved closer, placing a hand on her shoulder, and she realized his presence was like a shield, protecting her from the darkness that Carlos represented. The judge, visibly shaken by the gravity of the accusations, called for a break to allow the evidence to be examined. Clara and Miguel stepped aside, their hearts beating in unison. "You were amazing in there," Miguel praised, a genuine smile lighting up his face. "Now we can't stop. We need to prepare for what comes next." Clara looked into his eyes, and for the first time she felt a mix of hope and determination. Together, they became more than just allies. They became a force fighting against corruption and injustice. And while the future was uncertain, one thing was clear. They were ready to face any storm that came, side by side. The heavy silence of the courtroom was almost palpable. Clara sat in the chair, her heart racing, as the jurors' eyes surrounded her like hungry predators. The light filtering through the tall windows illuminated her face, revealing the determination in her eyes. She was not there just to seek justice, but to expose the truth that Carlos had tried to bury under layers of lies. When the judge struck the gavel, an echo resonated in the room, and Clara stood up, feeling the adrenaline surging through her veins. The prosecuting attorney, a man in a dark suit with piercing eyes, encouraged her to proceed. With a steady voice, Clara began recounting the events that led to that hearing. Police corruption, bribery, and above all, the betrayal by Carlos, her former partner, who now watched her with an ironic smile. Carlos always had access to privileged information, Clara declared, her voice echoing in the room. He used that to manipulate investigations, benefiting people who shouldn't have protection. I could not remain silent, the audience murmured, and Clara saw some jurors widen their eyes. But Carlos, in his chair, appeared unshaken. He crossed his arms and with a look of disdain began to speak. "And you think you can accuse me with impunity, Clara? You who always had such an interesting past?" His voice was venomous, and the jurors turned to her, anticipation hanging in the air. "You know your own choices can come to light. I know everything." The room filled with a tense silence. Clara felt warmth rise to her face, but she couldn't let herself be defeated. He was playing dirty, and she knew she needed to be stronger. She took a deep breath, her chest expanding as she decided not to back down. "If you're insinuating that I have something to hide, know that I'm not afraid to confront my past," Clara replied, her voice now louder and clearer. "Unlike you, who hides behind a uniform, I've faced my mistakes, and that's what makes me stronger than you will ever be." The judge looked at her with approval, and the audience began to murmur again. Carlos, on the other hand, seemed irritated. He hadn't expected Clara to have the courage to fight back. The tension in the air was electrifying, and Clara felt a wave of adrenaline wash over her. "You can try to bring me down, Carlos, but I am not the woman you knew years ago. I am a survivor," she said fervently, looking directly into his eyes. "And I will fight to ensure that this corruption does not continue to destroy lives." The defense attorney stood up, trying to interrupt, but Clara would not be intimidated. It was her time to shine, to show that the truth, no matter how painful, would always prevail. She turned to the judge, her expression determined. "Your Honor, I request that you allow me to present evidence that could change everything," she said, pulling a folder from the side. The court leaned forward, curiosity and anticipation mixed. Clara took out a recording she had secretly obtained, where Carlos discussed the details of his corrupt schemes. "This recording reveals not only your betrayal, Carlos, but also your disdain for the justice we swore to protect," Clara declared as the tape began to play. The room was in shock with the words echoing, exposing the true face of the man who presented himself as the defender of the law. Carlos, now visibly pale, tried to stand up, but was interrupted by the judge, who commanded him to sit down. The murmurs among the jurors intensified, and Clara felt a mix of relief and strength as she witnessed the turn of events. "If you think you can intimidate me with secrets from my past, know that I am no longer afraid of you," Clara concluded, her voice resonating like thunder. "Today the truth will be revealed, and I, Clara Mendez, will not be silenced." The court was ablaze, not just with the evidence, but with the courage emanating from her. As Carlos sank deeper into his own game, Clara rose, each word echoing with the strength of a storm. The battle was far from over, but one thing was certain: she was not alone, and more importantly, the truth had a power that no one could extinguish. Clara took a deep breath as she left the courtroom, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. The sound of the judge's gavel echoed in her mind, marking the climax of a battle that felt endless. Carlos, the man who once seemed invincible, was now handcuffed, his look of disdain transforming into desperation. Clara had managed to unmask him, but the victory had a bitter taste. She felt the weight of something greater on her shoulders. The fight for justice was just the beginning. As she walked through the cold corridors of the court, a shiver ran down her spine. What would become of her life now? Questions danced in, her mind like shadows. Clara stopped in front of a window, looking out at the grey sky that seemed to reflect her inner confusion. It was a cloudy day, but inside her a storm was brewing. "Clara," Anna's gentle voice brought her back to reality. The woman who had been such a crucial witness in the trial now seemed small, vulnerable. Her eyes were red, and her expression carried a weight that Clara couldn't decipher. "Hi, Anna, are you okay?" Clara asked, trying to hide the concern that overwhelmed her. Anna was far from an ordinary woman. Her strength had illuminated the courtroom. But now, in that expression, Clara saw something deeper. "I need to tell you something." Anna hesitated, glancing around as if fearing someone could overhear. Clara felt her heart race. What could be so important that it would interrupt the celebration of Carlos's conviction? "Let's go somewhere more private," Clara suggested, pulling Anna into an empty waiting room. The silence in that space was almost palpable, and the tension was growing between them. Anna took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the floor. "You have no idea what I went through before all of this. Before Carlos." Her voice trembled, and Clara could feel the pain in the unspoken words. "I'm here, Anna, you can trust me," Clara encouraged, moving closer, gently holding the woman's hand. The gesture was a sign of support, a silent promise that she wouldn't abandon her. Anna looked into Clara's eyes, and for a moment, a whirlwind of emotions passed between them. Carlos wasn't just a criminal. He was connected to something much bigger, something I couldn't escape. "And you, Clara, are more involved than you think." Anna's words were like an echo reverberating in Clara, and she felt a chill in her stomach. "What are you talking about? I was part of a scheme long before you and I met. He used women like me to cover up an information trafficking operation. And now, with his arrest, you've become a target. They won't stop until you are." "Silenced," Anna revealed, her voice now a whisper. Clara's heart raced, a terrifying discovery, but also an unexpected connection. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I didn't know how. I thought that if you convicted him, it would all be over. But now I realize this is just the beginning. They'll want revenge," Anna said, tears streaming down her face. Clara felt a whirlwind of emotions inside her, anger, fear, and, above all, a burning desire to protect Anna. "We need to do something. Let's go to the police. Let's tell everything." "No, Clara," Anna exclaimed with a desperate look. "If you do that, you will be putting your life at risk. We need to be smarter than they are." The clock on the wall seemed to slow down, each tick resonating like an alarm. Clara knew she was at a crossroads. The fight for justice, which seemed so clear, was now becoming a maze of shadows and secrets. "So, what do we do?" Clara asked, determined not to give up. "We need to investigate. We need to understand who is behind him, who else is involved. Only then can we protect ourselves," Anna replied, now with a glimmer of determination in her eyes. The connection between them strengthened at that moment. Clara realized she wasn't alone. There was a strength emerging from her vulnerability. "Let's do this together. We won't let them bring us down." Anna nodded, a slight smile appearing amidst her tears. "Together, we are stronger, and—" So as the sky continued to darken outside, Clara and Anna joined in a silent alliance, aware that the battle was just beginning. Anna's past intertwined with Clara's future, and together they were ready to face the approaching storm, determined to unmask the secrets that threatened their lives. The courtroom was silent, tension hanging in the air like a heavy cloud. Clara, with her eyes fixed on the judge's bench, felt her heart pounding to the rhythm of a battle that had finally come to an end. The truth, that truth she had carried as a burden for so long, had finally emerged from the shadows, and now the light of justice shone bright. Beside her, Anna held her hand tightly, a simple gesture that communicated the solidarity of a friendship that had transformed into sisterhood. "Are you ready for this?" Anna whispered, her gaze reflecting both fear and hope. "More than ever," Clara replied, her voice firm, though trembling with emotion. "I can't let the pain of other women be ignored." After weeks of testimonies and revelations, Clara knew her story could be the key to opening the doors of change. Now, in front of the audience that had once seen her as a victim, she decided to transform into a warrior. The judge struck the gavel, and the echo resonated like a sign of freedom. As they exited the courtroom, the fresh morning air hit her like a balm. Clara took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years of oppression dissipate. Beside her, Anna smiled, and together they crossed the street, passing a group of reporters and onlookers. The first question was directed at Clara. What do you plan to do now that the truth has been revealed? A microphone was shoved in her direction, and Clara felt the urge to speak, to share her vision. I want to help other women find their voices, she said, firm and clear. I am starting an NGO dedicated to combating corruption and protecting human rights. No one should have to go through what I went through. Clara's words resonated like a call to action that made the crowd stop and listen. Deep in her heart, she knew she was just beginning. As she returned home, the image of her old life began to fade, making way for a future she had never dared to dream. With each step, her determination grew. Months passed, and the NGO came to life. Clara and Anna worked tirelessly, organizing events, lectures and awareness campaigns. The walls of the small office were adorned with photos of women who had risen against injustice, each one a source of inspiration. Clara often remembered her own fear, the loneliness she felt before all this. Now she was a beacon of hope. One afternoon during a lecture, a young woman stood up, tears in her eyes. I was also a victim, but hearing your story gave me the courage to fight. What can I do to help? Clara smiled, feeling her heart swell with gratitude. We need voices like yours. Each of you has a role in this movement. Together, we are stronger. The me. Room echoed with applause, and Clara realized that her struggle was no longer just hers. She had become part of a larger movement. The stories of pain intertwined into a fabric of resistance, and what was once a burden was now transforming into a legacy of struggle and hope. That night, as Clara looked out the window, contemplating the illuminated city, she remembered everything she had been through. The tears that were once of despair were now turning into tears of joy. She turned to Anna, who was beside her, and said, I never imagined we could achieve this. Anna smiled, her eyes shining. You are a heroine, Clara. And this is just the beginning. Clara felt a new surge rising within her, a flame that propelled her to keep fighting. The transformation she had experienced was not just about her own life, but about all the lives she could touch, all the voices she could help amplify. And with that she knew she was finally free,